Hey Social students, welcome back. I'm just going to post a brief little video here to set up the context of the documentary that you're going to be watching in class today. So, what makes us human? I want you to go ahead, answer this question in 4 to 5 sentences, and I want you to record it in the Edpuzzle video. I also want you to record it in the comment section on your notebook, okay, in your interactive notebook. So please record it in both of those places. Right? So take a minute to answer this question now. Okay, so hopefully you're able to answer that question, and this is basically what I was looking for. Okay, without language, humans have no mechanism, right, for developing thought and developing intelligence and communicating with the world around us. So we have no language, we really have no culture. Right? We have no language, we have no shared sense of life, and therefore without culture, we're not able to fully become the humans that we are. So socialization and social environment and language are really important and able for us to move past the rudimentary levels of communication, right? Where we don't have to rely so much on instincts. Instincts become somewhat secondary. So some sociologists even argue that instincts altogether really become less significant in the sense of our communication because we learn language, right? We learn how to interact with others. We learn how to ask for things. We learn how to say, I'm hungry. We learn how to say, I'm upset. And we don't have to remain on pouting and suckling and crying in order to communicate what we need. So instincts become secondary as socialization enables us to be driven by language. Okay? So this is what makes us human. Language is what makes us very discreetly different from other species. Now, what would actually happen if we were untouched by society? Okay, you have something called feral children, children who are assumed to have been raised by animals, right? And a popular case is the wild boy of Avron. Okay, it was a boy who was found in the forest in France, and he would be studied by a French scientist, Jean Itard. He was a young medical student, and what he did was he actually adopted Victor, or Victor. He gave this feral child a name, called his name was Victor, and Itard believed two things. All right, he believed that there were two things that separated humans from animals. The first was language, and the second was empathy. So Victor believed that, or sorry, Itard believed that he could civilize Victor by one, teaching him how to speak and communicate, and two, teaching him to understand human emotion. And while Victor showed some early progress, he didn't really move anywhere past a rudimentary level. So he failed to really progress and grasp language. Now, while the boy did fail to grasp language, and Itard was never able to fully civilize this child, one of the most significant factors was that through his research, he was able to explain how language and the ability to learn language really is a significant factor in developing a relationship with humans in society. And so this also led to the critical period hypothesis, which basically just claims that there is a critical window in which we need to learn language. If we don't learn it within that critical period, we'll never be able to fully grasp or master any sort of language or type of communication, whether it's verbal or possibly even sign language, okay? But Itard focused mainly on verbal language. He didn't teach the boy any sort of sign language, and so that's where some of the criticism comes for this critical period hypothesis. Now, a more modern example is Jeannie Wiley, and you guys are going to be watching a documentary on this today. I might have shown this documentary in psychology last year. I can't really remember if I did or not, but I definitely didn't show it this year. And so we're going to be watching this today in class. But Jeannie Wiley was a 13-year-old girl, and she was rescued and found by a social worker in California at the age of 13. Now, Jeannie had been locked up in her bedroom for 13 years, tied to a potty chair, and therefore she had no socialization, no exposure to human interaction until she was 13 years old. And so, from reports of this case study, it was pretty apparent that her father was heavily abusive, possibly responsible for the death of two of Jeannie's siblings. Her mother was partially blind and absolutely frightened of her husband. Therefore, when Jeannie was found, she could not speak. She didn't know how to chew. She didn't know how to stand upright. She couldn't straighten her hands. She couldn't straighten her legs. And her intelligence score was that of a 1-year-old. So, when you watch this documentary, it's really really tragic. And as you see, although despite the doctor's best efforts, she was never really fully able to grasp language. And then eventually, as you kind of hear towards the end of the documentary, that her mother forbade any further contact with these doctors that were actually helping her progress, and therefore it's pretty clear that after all these doctors worked with her, a lot of her progress regressed, and she lost the ability to develop her communication skills, and it's really tragic. But there are moments when you're watching this documentary where your heart just melts because you see Jeannie interacting with the world for the very first time in her life. Right? She goes to the ocean. She sees what happens when you take a balloon and just let it go into the sky, and it just keeps going up and up and up. And she's just so fascinated with it, and she's fascinated with the sand on her feet, and the cool ocean water and the breeze on her face, and it's just really amazing how fascinated she is with the world that we so often take advantage of and don't really appreciate the life that we have. And so it's a beautiful documentary. However, it is very tragic. Now, with Jeannie, kind of the main conclusion here is that with no socialization or speech exposure, right, these things are heavily reliant on the development of human intelligence. And if we don't have some sort of socialization, some sort of speech exposure, some sort of language to express our emotions, to express our understanding, to express our thoughts, then we'll really never be able to develop this intelligence. So we need that early on. So when looking at Jeannie's case and research done by Harry Harlow on deprived animals, what does this tell us about being human? Well, if you've taken general psych, you've definitely heard of Harry Harlow. And in 1971, he and his wife were basically studying the psychological effects of attachment, insecure and secure attachment between these isolated and deprived animals and these surrogate mothers regarding nourishment and bodily contact. As you can see, the difference between these surrogate mothers down here. But more so related to this course, sociology, Harlow found after this experiment of attachment that there were some major effects between severe and extended isolation and how that can impair one's socialization process. So basically what he found was that the longer the monkeys were isolated, right? Some were isolated 3 months, some were isolated 6, some were isolated 9 months, some were isolated a year or longer. The longer they were isolated, the more difficult it was for them to adjust to normal monkey life. And if it was extended too long, they were never able to truly interact in a regular fashion or normal fashion with their kindred. Okay, so examples, what do I mean by interact, right? So for monkeys, it would be like failure to play with the other monkeys, failure to interact with them, failure to have sex, and then some of them did get pregnant, but once they had children, they had no idea how to care for their babies. They were very aggressive. They would crush their babies' heads against the cage floor. They were always rejected by the other monkeys if that period generally extended 6 months or more. And so if it was under 6 months, it seemed as though these monkeys could make some sort of normality with their social interactions with the other monkeys. But if it was longer than 6 months of isolation, it was incredibly difficult for them to socialize with the other monkeys around them. And so what does this tell us about Genie, right? How does this relate to Genie? Now, we want to be careful not to compare monkeys to humans, as they're different. However, there are some takeaways we can see within this research, and that is mainly that there seems to be this critical learning stage early on, not only in humans but also in animals, and the ability to adapt and fully adjust to a social environment of like kin, right? So when we do not have this socialization, the social interaction with our kin, we lack the ability to communicate effectively, and we lack the ability to develop some sort of language, and we also lack the ability to have some sort of social skill, in the sense that we can fully interact with our like kin around us. Okay, so this is the main takeaway that we see within Genie's case and also deprived animals. We must have some sort of social interaction, and if it's missed, language and social skills will never fully develop. Okay, lastly, you guys are going to be watching a documentary today, Genie, The Secrets of a Wild Child. You will fill out the PDF worksheet in which I have posted for you on our Google Doc, and you will do part 1. You'll list some examples of nature and nurture, and then part 2 you will answer questions 1 through 5 as the documentary plays through. Okay? And then after you're finished with that, you can go ahead and post this in the notebook. But that's it for today, guys, and we'll see you next time. All right, have a good afternoon.